Hello, I'm Jenny Klochko, and you're watching my podcast, the platform for guests and stories beyond your daily newsfeed. Today it's something unique because it's not just a person or it's not just a story and it's not just event. Today we have unique opportunity to hear what the Swedish archives, historical archives, tell us about Ukraine, identity, fight for independence. And it's a unique opportunity because these archives were saved away from Moscow influence, Russian propaganda for centuries. This is the moment in history when these archives help Ukraine to fight back and to restore the truth. My guest today is Marina Trattner. She's journalist, she's Swedish lawyer, and she's independent researcher of the Swedish archives. Marina, welcome to the podcast. I'm so honored and I'm so excited to have you today.
Good day. Thank you very much for having me. It's a big honor.
Marina, how many years of Russian-Ukrainian war for the independence?
This question is normally used to check the person's attitude to the events in Ukraine. And normally, the person that is following the news would tell you that the war started the 24th of February 2022. But those who follow the events and trace back them later to the earlier stage, they will probably tell you that the war started from the occupation of Crimea. Some people probably claim that it's not true. It started from the events on Independence Square in Kyiv in 2013. And probably some experts or strategists would tell you that the war actually started from the war in Georgia. When they started occupying that country, we were supposed to react differently, more firmly and more adequate. And that could help us to stop the war in Ukraine there in Georgia. But if you start to cooperate with different researchers, with historians in Ukraine, you will probably trace back this war to 1169, when our enemy, Andrei Bogolubsky, Prince of Vladimir Susdal, attacked Kiev. Formerly, it's called Sack of Kiev. He created a coalition with 11 princes, and he attacked Kiev. They plundered and looted the capital of our country during several days. They took the most precious icons and books from Kiev and moved them to their cities. And then several years after that, they decided to attack Kiev again. So in December 1173, they attacked Kiev again, but with a coalition of 20 princes, a much bigger army. But they were totally defeated near Vyshgorod. And this stopped them. So for me and many other historians, the war between our enemies from territory of modern Russia started then. And they attacked our country, our territory in generations, and they looted. They took the most, they looted it, they took the most precious items, books, manuscripts, icons, and jewelries, and they demonstrated them in their museums and in different places and claimed that it's a part of their history. So since then, we are trying to restore our history and get it back and free it from Russian propaganda. So the war started 1169, and it keeps going with some short breaks, I would say.
So Ukraine wasn't created by Lenin, according to the most famous historian Vladimir Putin.
No, I could try to explain the situation in a very simple way. In 1834, the Tsar created an archaeographic commission that had a purpose to rewrite the history of Ukraine. and rewrite it without Ukrainian identity and successful fight for restoration of Ukrainian independence. They created the commission that analyzed different manuscripts in private archives and collections, and they started to create something that is called the history of southwestern Russia. And basically it was the history of Ukraine that they tried to rewrite. And everything what contradicted Russian propaganda and the view on Ukraine as an independent, as a part of Russia, was eliminated from these publications. So this archaeographic commission, it has been working for centuries, creating this history of Russia, and they also had a purpose to create the complex of inferiority among Ukrainians. They try to spread the idea that the culture, the religion, and everything coming from Moscow down to suburbs. And those who speak Ukrainian, they are losers. They do not have any previous history of success, which is totally false. But if you want to manipulate the society, you cut their memory, historical memory, you cut their connection with their ancestors, and you cut their possibility to identify with something else. Then they become like zombies. You can put any kind of ideas in their heads and you can manipulate them. And it's very useful and suitable for Moscow because their policy is like they're occupying a country, annihilate the local the local people, and they put the Russian inhabitants there, and they create their version of history. Then they take those people from occupied territories that are still there and use them to occupy the neighboring countries, and so on and so forth. They keep going, they're expanding their state, they do not create anything. As you see now, they occupied Crimea, and they occupied certain territories in Donetsk and Lugansk region, and they use people from these territories to go in front of Russian soldiers, and they use them as
Shield.
As a shield. I wouldn't say otherwise. Certain people know about their history, but they're forced to participate in that. But other people, they do not know any history, and they're starting to support Russians, which is very wrong. So history is crucial for countries' survival. And during Ukrainian history, if you would like to trace it back in centuries and follow and research the continuity of our statehood or our fight for restoration of our state, you could see that Ukrainian army was the guarantee of Ukraine's existence. So when Bogdan Khmelnytsky created 100,000 the army of 100,000 soldiers, he created a guarantee for Ukraine's existence. And even after his death, this army was a guarantee for Ukraine's existence. So if you want to make sure that the country will survive, support Ukrainian army by all means, because they guarantee that they will be the shield against the enemies. They will protect Ukraine, they will protect Europe, and they will protect the rest of the world.
Since you started your research with the Swedish archives, and let's explain our viewers that this call from your heart was coming sort of, you wanted to research the family history of your husband, who is Swedish, and you go to what year?
I managed to trace it. It was very well documented, and in Sweden, you could trace it back to year 908 to the Viking called Bjorn. So, and then I managed to trace the history of my family. First, I knew it back to 1932. when Bolsheviks provoked Holodomor, it's starvation in Ukraine, in that region where my grandfather was living. So he was just 20 years old when they provoked it, and they created it artificially. And it was impossible to leave that territory, but he managed to leave that territory together with his mother. He was just 20 years old. And due to this, our family survived. And I didn't know much more about that, but when I started to research the information about Ukraine, about Sweden, we wrote a book together with historians about the documents that I found in Swedish archives, and we published the documents together with other known sources to popularize, to make them more popular, so that people would know about their existence. And then I made a presentation of this book in Summe, and they said, we would like to make a little present for you. Could we do that? I said, of course. And then historians from a museum in Nedrigailov, where my grandfather originated from, he said, we managed to research the history of your family tree back to 1571, to the Cossacks who were serving in the army on the right bank of the Dnieper River. And you can follow, you can trace back the history of the ancestors. And we actually wanted to visit the grave of some of them. And when we came there, we saw that it was a warning, careful, caution, landmines. So Russian put mines on the graves, so it's impossible to visit them at the moment. But I'm very, very grateful to those people who found the history, researched the history of my family, and gave it back to me.
Since you started your amazing research, and I found it very inspiring, and looking forward to get. I haven't got the book, but I've checked everything online, and I know the film is coming, so I'm very anticipating and waiting for to watch it. So, what was your biggest surprise? Is it possible to identify something one, since you started looking for Ukraine's traces for everything through the centuries, and there's some the biggest, because I'm sure there are lots of treasures you came across.
The biggest surprise, actually, we made surprises. We've been surprised regularly because the history that we started to restore together with Ukrainian historians, it was totally free from Russian propaganda, and we created some kind of international cooperation where I found doctors of history in different countries that were highly specialized in certain periods of our history, and they were willing to help me. So I found a very interesting, not one document, but many volumes with the documents about our revenge after the Battle of Poltava. Because it's very popular to talk about it and give a lot of credit to Peter I, because he got access to Baltic Sea. But then nearly nobody wrote about the revenge, what happened after the Battle of Poltava. And we found out that Peter I came nearly with the same army south because he wanted to conquer Constantinople and became the protector of Orthodox Church and Orthodox belief. And he was so sure in his victory that he didn't even take enough of food for his army. But he became surrounded by the army of big coalition of Turks, Crimean Tatars, Palatine of Kiev, its voivode of Kiev, Poles, and others. And it went really bad for him. They were surrounded, they had no food, they had no water. Peter I was begging for surrender 3 times. And when I read it, I was really shocked. I never heard about it. And then we started to dig deeper and research more, and we could find the evidence about the bribes that he gave to Storvizir, the vizier, the representative of Sultan of Osmanian state. He collected everything of value in the place where he was on the battlefield, and he put it on the carriages and gave it to the bribe to the representative of Osmanian army, and he promised to take his army away from Poland, but the most important, he promised to recognize the independence of Ukraine. In 1711, I've never heard of it before. So we started to research more and more and more, and we found more evidence about it. And Storvizir, Big Vizier, he listened to him and he accepted this, and he started to negotiate about the peace agreement, but he didn't actually have a right to do that, because the Sultan gave him an order to win over the Peter I, to take him as a prisoner or to accept capitulation, nothing else, surrender. He didn't have a right to negotiate about any peace agreement, but he did that anyhow. And he created a convoy, military convoy, to protect Peter I and his army. He gave him food, and he made sure that he could return home safely. Everybody who participated in this war, in this battle, they were really angry with what has happened. And Crimean Tatars, they were attacking the army, the rest of Moscovitan army, all the way back. They didn't want to follow the orders. And Peter I, as soon as he left this territory, he started to inform the different European countries about his triumphal victory over Turks. And then in 1711, all those people who participated in this coalition, they gathered together for the first time to defeat Russian propaganda and inform the truth to the world. They published the exact description of what happened during this battle, and then they confirmed that he agreed to pay the yearly tribute to Crimean Khan. Yearly tribute, 40,000 every year, as Russia did before during centuries. It was a little short break between these payments. They paid it until 1699, 1700, and then they started to pay it again in 1711. And it was a shame for him. He didn't want to recognize it. So he started to rewrite the points of this peace agreement. And the Swedish king, Charles XII, understood that there will be no fulfillment of the promises. There will be no release of the army from Poland. There will be no release of the army from Ukraine, that Peter I will never recognize the independence of Ukraine. And then he sat down and wrote a very important letter. I've never seen it before. And in one paragraph, I want to quote it, to read it for you exactly so that you understand the importance of this letter. He wrote to the ambassador of Sweden in Constantinople, and this ambassador was supposed to meet the Sultan of Osmanian Empire and persuade the Sultan to force Peter I to fulfill his promises and recognize the independence of Ukraine. And here are the words. At the same time, he should insist that this article, which affirms the freedom of Ukraine and all Zaporozhians, should immediately and fully come into force, so that all of Ukraine and Exercitus Zaporozhiensis, Військо Запорожське, would thus fully enjoy their ancient freedoms and liberties, and would also be granted ownership of the territory within their ancient borders, under the leadership of the present Hetman, Philip Orlik, in such a way that the people described above immediately gained the status of an independent state and never again in any manner subordinated to the Tsar or remained under his protectorate. So you cannot interpret this article in two different ways. It's very, very clear. And when we started to collaborate with different Ukrainian historians and dig for more documents, we found the confirmation of the fact that in 1711, Ukraine had a real chance to gain its independence. So Moscovites, they didn't want to reveal this information. And Peter I started to bribe his representatives in prison in Constantinople to affect everybody who participated in these negotiations. His aim was to either write that all the rights to Ukraine go to Peter I, or that Ukraine disappear as a subject of negotiations from this peace agreement. Sultan got this information and he couldn't believe his ears. So we found one letter written in cipher, which we could decipher and get the information that Sultan changed his clothes and went incognito to prison to check whether his guards were bribed or not.
Wow.
He got evidence, he became mad, and he proclaimed the war to Peter I. Just because of Ukraine. And then he fired people who were bribed, but this didn't save the situation. So the wisdom of all this, do not listen to promises of Russians. They fulfill nothing of what they promise. And do not let them to corrupt your countries, because in the end, it will be the death of your country.
Marina, you learned how to read Cossacks' letters. You went through numerous courses, how to decode, how to understand, interpret all those handwritings, not just printed documents, which usually historians use it. And those letters you came across, the Ukrainian Cossacks to Swedish kings, does it remind you what's happening right now in Ukraine when Ukrainian politicians go in to sort of empower the cooperation between European countries and US and sort of like be united against Putin and his aggression? And what's your opinion about this legendary Cossacks warriors? Do you have the favorite one?
All of them. I deeply and truly admire every person and every Ukrainian person, every person in a foreign country that in one way or another helped and support Ukraine in its fight for restoration of its statehood. And if you research these documents, you will see that it's not some kind of short described periods, and then it's like dark ages, and then short information about certain development in the country, and then it's like not known because we do not have original sources. If you dig deeper, you will see the continuity of our fight for the restoration of our independence, and every person who participated in it deserves admiration, not just from me, but from the rest of the world, because they were creating a reliable shield to defend Europe and defend civilization. So very important thing is to understand that we are not creating new coalitions now. We started to collaborate from 1348, and we were the defining factor in many European victories. We formed the view of Europe as it is now, because many victories wouldn't be won without participation of our military forces. And this is important to remember. And when we try to analyze the cooperation of our hetmans, representatives from our country, with our other kings and leaders, we should also understand that even then it wasn't unique. the Swedish king, Charles XII, he inherited the tradition of support of Ukrainian Cossacks from his father and grandfather. We could trace it back to 1623. And why was it important? Because the Swedish kings, they owned the territory around Baltic Sea, and they were interested in creating the stable trading zone where you could travel, where you can conduct the trade, and where you can pay your taxes to the Swedish, the Kingdom of Sweden. They were not interested in any kind of wars there, but they saw that Moscovites, as Russians were called until 1721, that they were attacking the neighboring countries, they were destabilizing this territory, and they were expanding. So it was impossible to hold this territory safe. It was impossible to conduct the trade peacefully and freely. It was impossible to protect Sweden. So they were looking for the people who could support them in this purpose of stabilizing this region, and the people who could hold this word and fulfill their promises. And they knew that Cossacks are those that you could trust. And if you look back, you could see the history of this collaboration. And when we started to dig more and more, we found even information about earlier period of our history. We found the information that some Cossacks served in Swedish army when it was a war on the Russian territory. Their chief, their leader, got killed during one battle, and during those days, it was totally normal. If you're highly qualified, you could go to the nearest military unit and try to be hired there to continue working as a military. So we found documents with the help of Polish researchers about the evidence that Ukrainian Cossacks were serving in Swedish army. And we didn't know about that. Then we found information about the successful military campaigns against Moscow, that our princes, together with armies, took over Moscow several times. And we have evidence of that. And it's a very interesting period of history because it contradicts Russian view on its own history. It's about, in Russian, it's called smuta. It's like unclear time in the politics. And the prince that was appointed officially was representative from our princes, from our army. His name was Dmitry, and he had a wife, Marina Mnishek. They were chosen officially, accepted, and they conducted several reforms, but then he got killed, and then he was replaced with another prince. But the funny thing is, Russians hated this part of their history because they have to recognize that Cossacks not just won over them, but they appointed a prince there that was officially recognized. So they started to name him as false Dmitry, Lže Dmitry. But I started to research the letters of Russians or Moscovitians from that period to Swedish kings, and you see very clearly that there is no false in front of Dmitry. He is written as Tsar Dmitry, everywhere. So if you would like to research Ukrainian and Swedish history, you can find it totally free from Russian propaganda, probably until 1747. And why this year? Because the royal historian Olof von Dalin started to write the history of Sweden. And when he was describing certain periods of our history, he found out information about Moscovian research in certain matters. And he was forced to refer to this research. So then you start to get some kind of Moscovitian influence in interpretation of certain historical events, even on our territory. But if you analyze the letters of different ambassadors and other documents, they're totally free from Russian influence. And this is very, very, very inspiring because in Swedish letters, you read the facts that different tradesmen or diplomats were writing so that Swedish king could use them to make correct strategic decisions. And they do not admire Peter I. He's barbarian. He's not keeping his promises. They do not see him as something admirable. So it's totally different picture. And I was reading it, I couldn't even believe my eyes. And European Cossacks were Europeans, and they had high culture, developed churches and everything. And it was a total contrast. So before the war, they wrote very interesting information that before the war, Peter I was traveling incognito and tried to spy on different fortresses. And he was caught. And they said, you shouldn't be here. And he said, I would like to reform my army as the most progressive army of our time, Swedish army. And he said, and the Swedish representative said, it will be impossible. Thank you. Goodbye. So I was like, that's a nice attitude, adequate. And I was reading more and more and more and more, and all my view on this great Russian history, great Russian culture, it disappeared totally. It became more adequate. But Swedes, they are very shy. They do not come with a description of their successes. And many of them, they do not remember these events. So every time when I find something that describes Sweden from this very strong point of view and Ukraine from a very strong point of view, and I describe this, Swedes come to me after the lectures and say, it's incredible. We had no idea about this part of our history. We are very brave. I said, yes, yes, you are. You should be proud.
Marina, I watched your presentation, the book presentation, and you mentioned in the interview and during the presentation, you also said during your research, you came across through numerous secret documents which were coded. Can you share a few, maybe some exciting examples of this coded secret messages from that time?
Yes, thank you for this question. When I started to read these documents, I started from the news published in different Swedish newspapers, and they started to publish international news in 1645. So I could follow different events conducted by Cossacks in Ukraine, written in newspapers. And these news, many of them were not known in Ukraine. So I started to read in these Gothic style letters. And the different terms that were used, they were very old ones, and they were replaced with other terms. So, for example, when it was a sentence that Cossacks were fighting for a compendium, it's a notebook. When you are writing different lectures, when you write down different lectures, you know, how could they find for compendium? And then I found an online source, it's a vocabulary of Swedish Academy of Science called SAOAB, and I could check different terms back to 15th century. And then I found out that compendium was economic payment, so that you could hire them as an army for certain military campaigns. And that was very interesting. So I started to translate more and more, and then I learned to read the handwritten letters, and they were mixed. They were written in the mixture of different languages. In 1649, they could write one letter with five different languages. They could write it in Swedish, German, French, and Latin. And Latin in itself was a mixture because they were using the beginnings of the words in Latin and the endings in Swedish. So it was a total mixture that made me very frustrated. And I applied to a course in paleography. Paleography, it's a const of reading these old handwritten texts. And I've learned to read the letters written in 18th century, 17th century, 16th century, 15th century. And then I understood that the most important information was written in international language of that time in Latin, but my Latin, my knowledge wasn't enough. And I applied for a course in Latin. In Sweden, it's a fantastic system of lifelong learning. You can apply to different kind of courses, and you can finish them, and you can change your specialization. You can develop until your last breath, and I love it. So I applied to these different courses, and it allowed me to get the expertise that I didn't have to understand all these letters. And I was so happy that I could identify important documents and then send them to Ukraine, to different doctors of history, to analyze them, translate them, and present them for Ukrainians. But then I saw that the most important information was written in Schiffer. And I found Charles XII, the Swedish King Charles XII, Schiffer, and certain letters, they were deciphered. They wrote the letters or words above the numbers. And I was very happy. I wrote down everything, and I created the Schiffer of Charles XII. And I thought, now I'm going to read the most important information about Cossacks. And I called to the National Archives of Sweden, and my collaboration with them, it's one of my sins. I cannot describe it otherwise, because I started to write first one request about one document per day, and then one request per week, then one request per day, then 10 requests per day. And they found one very important specialist, Jan Mispelere, in this in this period, in this kind of history, Swedish-Ukrainian history. And he's a poor person. He was forced to sit and reply just on my requests. And we started to collaborate, and we became friends. And he explained for me that, yes, of course, we have a lot of information that is deciphered. You have to read it and translate. I said, okay. I started to work with it. I became very excited. And then I wrote to the Swedish archive, not to him, but to another division. And I said, I managed to create the Schiffer of Charles XII. Do you have other Schiffers? He said, Marina, of course. We have 26 boxes of Schiffers. Please welcome and visit our archive. I said, what do you mean 26 boxes? They said, every informator, the person that was abroad and serving for the king, had its own Schiffer. So you have for different letters from different informators, different diplomats or trade persons, business persons. You have to find his own Schiffer. I started to find Schiffers, and I started to decipher the most important information. And it helped me to understand that the history that existed at that time, and probably exists now, was conducted in 3 different levels. The first level was created for public opinion, because you had to report about what kind of decisions you've made, and you have to make a register of these decisions. You have to rewrite everything and show to the population so that you're following the promises and all the orders of the king, and so on and so forth. Next level was Schiffered history, and even higher level was burned history. The burned history is the most interesting one, because we managed to find the letters that Swedish kings ordered to burn after the diplomat, the ambassador, read through them, because it was a secret message, important message in this letter, and enemies were not supposed to get an information about it. And this letter that I quoted for you was one of these letters that was supposed to be burned. But Thomas Funk preserved it, and he preserved it in the envelope with a sign. One of the letters that was supposed to be burned, but the ambassador decided to save it from the fire.
Thank goodness for that.
Yes, and then some important information was transferred verbally to the person that arrived. And how can we trace that information? Because, for example, when the ambassadors from Crimea came to Sweden, you can read their formal letter in the formal letter, and there is some kind of information that they offer friendship between the countries, and they say that we are your friends and the friends of your friends. It's very diplomatic, very polite letter. But then if you go to a protocol of the verbal messages, you can see that we must unite with Cossacks, Sweden, Crimea, and Cossacks against Moscovia. And we will be successful in the fight against them if we will fight together. So this verbal or burned history is the most interesting one. Then we found protocols of highest government, highest level, highest divisions of Swedish government, and they had a division that that made strategic decisions, and they didn't release their documents. They were secret documents, and they were also written in Schiffer. And when I started to decipher them, for example, it was a moment when the daughter of Philip Orlik, Varvara, came to Sweden, and she wrote that we would like to get a pension that was appointed to my father. Is it possible to renew it because we would like to have some financial support? We have a tough situation at the moment. And then we read next document. In the next document, they decide to give a certain amount of money. They inform that they conduct the research, and they got the information that this pension was cancelled, and they have no, unfortunately, they have no possibility to continue with it, but they can pay a certain amount to her. And this is a dossier on Philip Orlik that I found during the project Residence of Orlik, restoration of Ukraine from different foreign archives that was initiated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. So, and then you go back and you read the decisions of this, the most secret part of this government, and they sit at the side and they say, she came here to inform us about the situation with her father, Philip Orlik, and he was very faithful to our country. So we would like to collect our own money to pay to her. Formally, we will write that we pay this amount of money that is written in the decision. But we all know that this money is not enough to pay her debts, and it's not enough for a safe travel for a young woman with her servant. So we collect our own money now, and we visit her, and we pay for everything. This is a totally different level of history. And I was sitting, it was like 2:15 at night or in the morning. I raised myself and I applauded. I said, I will find each of you who made this decision. It made me so immensely proud of Sweden in Ukraine, basically everything what I found. I do not need to travel to expensive resorts. I do not need to get any kind of property or jewelry. It's enough for me to have Wi-Fi and read these original documents to be so immensely happy and proud. And I want to share this feeling with other Ukrainians and Swedes and other people who support Ukraine.
Marina, let's explain who is Philip Orlik and why he's so important for Ukraine's history for those people who would hear this name first time.
Philip Orlik, he was the chief statesman, Pisar in Ukrainian. He was a chief secretary of the chief of Ukraine, Ivan Mazepa. Chief of Ukraine, it's Ukrainian term hetman. And after Poltava, before the Battle of Poltava in 1708, Ivan Mazepa created alliance cooperation with the Swedish king Charles XII. And Swedish king became a protector of Ukraine because in those days the power in the country was transferred from the king to the king, from prince to the prince. And if you do not have your own prince, you were supposed to have a protector, a king or a prince. And because Ukrainians didn't want to have any protections of Moscovia and Peter I, they got a protection from the Swedish king, Charles XII. Then it was a participation in the Battle of Poltava, which was unsuccessful. And Ivan Mazepa and Philip Orlik, his state secretary, and Charles XII, they traveled to Benderi. It's in Osmanian Empire. Now it's territory of Moldova. So they traveled there together with the Cossacks, about 5,000 persons, and they conducted their cooperation, international cooperation, with the aim to free Ukraine, to regain Ukraine from Moscovia, and to protect Europe. So Ivan Mazepa, who was chief of Ukraine until September 1709, he died because he was very old and sick. He died, and he was hoping that the son of his sister, Andrei Voinorovsky, who was 20 years old, that he would become the chief of state. But Andrei Voinorovsky refused to become a chief of state, and the Cossacks chose Philip Orlik because he was very well educated. He knew all the different details of international collaboration, and he could represent the country on a very high level. So they chose him, and he created, together with other experts, he created the first constitution in April 1710. And Charles XII, he confirmed this constitution and sent the copy of it to Ukraine to inform that they got a new chief of state, Philip Orlik. Philip Orlik, he was staying with Charles XII in Benderi, and then he returned to Sweden. He was living several years in Sweden. And then when Russians attacked Sweden in 1719, the Swedish first queen and then king, they understood that they have to defend Sweden, and they have to defend the family of Philip Orlik. So they arranged a secret mission. They asked Philip Orlik to travel to Crimea and then to Osmanian Empire to unite the forces and to occupy Astrakhan and Astrakhan region, to draw this Moscovitan army, marine and ships and everything, from Sweden down to Astrakhan, to put this danger away from Europe. And Philip Orlik, he was using different names that we found out in our research to protect his family and to conduct secret missions. And we are making a short film about that, 25-30 minutes long, with the help of artificial intelligence. And it will be based on this research. And I hope that everyone will hear and understand Philip Orlik, because he said that without peace in Ukraine, true, firm peace in Ukraine, there will be no peace in Europe.
So relevant for today. Marina, one of the strongest and one of the repetitive narratives of Russian propaganda everywhere, for internal audience, for Ukrainian audience, and also for the Western, for the outside audience, that is Russian and Ukraine are the same people. just because we interconnected all the grandparents of the Russians in Ukraine, so you can't really differ, the same identity. So why we would be separate? Through your work, not just Ukrainian, not just the daughter of proud Cossacks, but also the independent researcher of the Swedish archives, what do you have to say on that narrative? Do we share the same identity?
No. This is my short reply, because if you go back to the history of Byzantium and Constantinople, you can see very clearly that Kiev inherited the history of Constantinople, and it became the second Rome. We received the culture, religion, culture. We received culture from Byzantium in Greek language. We transferred civilization. We spread the civilization to the neighboring countries, and everything comes from Kiev north, in direction of north, not in the opposite direction. So very good question, because first, if you go, we started to research all this, not from 1050, for example, not from 970, but we started to move in the opposite direction, from the modern times back in history. And the more we dig, the more evidence we find that Muscovites, they didn't have this developed culture. They didn't have developed religious structure. They didn't have educational institutions, that all the people who had culture and could develop different new visions, new epochs like Renaissance, they were coming from Kiev north, and they were spreading the knowledge, because they didn't have enough places where they could see that conduct their supervision. So they got the education in Kiev, which was, because of its education, called Second Paris. So every time when we're supposed to translate different kind of books from Greek into Latin, or from Greek into German, they said, ask in the second Paris in Kiev. If you do not find the specialists there, then you cannot find them anywhere. So I can send you the link to a very interesting lecture about this, of Oleg Odnorozhenko, Doctor of Historical Studies, and to the lecture, online lecture of Alexander Alferov about history of Kiev. You will be surprised by really, really many revelations about our history. And you see how rich and fantastic history we had before Moscow was created. And then they were created, and they understood that if we would like to claim that we are protectors of Orthodox religion, we have to show that we inherited the power in a legal way. And the only legal way was to inherit it through Kiev. And the only way for them to inherit it was to occupy it and say that this is a part of our history. I give you an example. If a French person steals some kind of document from Ukraine, this French person doesn't claim that it's a French document, and it doesn't claim that all the French are Ukrainians, and it doesn't claim that France should be renamed to Ukraine. And it doesn't claim that all Ukrainian history is France, history of France. It will be so, like a history of psychopath, but it's totally okay for Russia, because they attacked Kiev, they plundered, they looted, they stole the most valuable things, and they said, it's ours, it's ours. And they describe it as a part of their rich Russian history. They try to rewrite the history of development of our Kievan metropolis. They claimed that our archbishops were transferred to first Volodymyr Sustal and then to Moscow, and since then all the religion comes just from Moscow. It's not true. And now, this very moment, I just received the message that I received the very important documents. I can show you. It's
Please do.
Acts from Constantinople. There. 2 volumes. These are written in Greek.
Uh-huh.
And they describe in detail how our Princess of Kiev restored metropolis of Kiev with a center in Kiev. And Russians do not want this information to come out in this form as it is in these books. They publish certain of these protocols, and just those who match as a puzzle bits in their view of their history of religion and history of the state. But you can see clearly that princes of Lithuania that started to rule in Kiev in 1362, that they restored metropolis in Kiev. And when Russians, Muscovites, sent their priest, their archbishop, as a candidate to be officially proclaimed as a metropolitan of Kiev, they sent him to Constantinople. He been appointed then to the metropolitan of Kiev, and then he was on the way back through Kiev. The Prince of Kiev stopped him and said, "What are you doing? You are allowed to come to Constantinople just in case when we do not have our own metropolitan of Kiev, but we have our own metropolitan of Kiev. So you are welcome to stay here livelong in the Kiev Pechera Lavra until this another metropolitan will die. Thank you." And he was locked in this cloister, in this monastery, until the end of his days. And what was the result of that? Constantinople recognized this and said, yes, it's true. They had their own metropolitan, the chief of Orthodox Church, and Muscovites were forced to recognize the metropolitan of Kiev, the chief of Orthodox Church in Kiev. How many Ukrainians know about it? Not many. So this information must be published, correctly translated, first of all, then published and popularized all over the world to show that they were trying to conduct this cowardice, falsified, manipulative, criminal policy in generations, and they just keep going. And the stealing of toilet seats and laundry machines is nothing new. It dates back to 1169. Nothing new. This they must celebrate from their ancestors, not something else. They cannot celebrate that they created something because the only thing they know, they attack, kill, plunder, loot, and take everything, steal everything. They are not capable of creating something genuine that is working for many centuries. They can probably invite foreign specialists to make something instead of them. But then everything collapses. The only thing they know, they create permanently nowadays, it's the age of their civilization, it's the sculptures of shit. Have you seen that? And they're proud of it.
No, they have great culture of looting. That's the historical truth.
But it's terrible, and you shouldn't make them powerful, and you shouldn't be afraid of them, because it's a totally miserable, ignorant, aggressive people. They shouldn't be interpreted as heroes, and nobody should be afraid of their threats, because it's a total emptiness behind this very successful, very powerful facade. It's the total emptiness and darkness behind it.
Marina, Cossacks not once but several times took over Moscow. And do you think it is the time to do the same and burn Kremlin to the ground? Would it be victory in your eyes, or you have other case scenarios?
That what you do now is a criminal act, you know, that you're talking to Swedish here.
Okay, correct me, please.
Would it be correct to follow the wisdom of your ancestors? I would ask.
Passion in my heart.
Basically, yes, but it will not lead to the correct result, because it's not just those people who represent Russia on the highest level that are the problem. It's the society. So those faces that we see are the faces of society, and they do not have much knowledge. They do not see the connections with the civilized world. They just know how to threaten and destroy, threaten and destroy. So you have to change their way of thinking, and it can take centuries. The only thing they have now is the poison thrown at them from all the mass media in Russia. They hate Ukraine, they hate Ukrainians, they do not believe that Ukrainian kids have a right to live, when in reality it's them who think those things have no right to live and express their opinions. Because these thoughts are crime against humanity. How can you say that Ukrainian kids have no right to live, that Ukraine should be annihilated? And these terrible things, if you repeat them many times, they become a norm, and they do not react on that as something terrible. They just bother about their own garden, about their own house, and about their own apartment, so that it will not be destroyed by Ukrainian drones. Annihilate them all, put our people in their beautiful houses in Crimea, and create one total beautiful Russia. There is no one beautiful total Russia. It's just destruction. It's miserable people who are not able to create something constructive, who are not able to create a culture. Their culture, it's just a cover for their FSB that connect different groups in different European and other countries with the purpose of destroying of these countries, so that they can occupy them and make them a part of their own territory. They're not creators, they're destructors. And here we have a clutch, because we Ukrainians, we as civilization are creators. We've always been there. We've always been in the center of civilization. We always were those who spread the civilization. And these continuous attacks on our territory made us resilient. And if certain people ask, but why don't you have this welfare? Why don't you have the same history? Why don't you have the same institutions as in Europe? Because Europe managed to survive behind the backs of Ukrainians. You can describe it as you wanted, but this is the truth. If you've been attacked from generation to generation, if all your valuables are looted and moved to Russia, and if they write everywhere that it's a part of our culture, they understood at a certain point that they are not able to rewrite everything as a part of history of Moscovia, so they stole our name, Rus. Rus is not Russia. It was a territory around Kiev, neighboring territories, but they understood if we used this term from 1729, they used it very actively as a Russian empire, then it will be very easy to take the old resources, even the Greek resources, with the name Russia, which were related to Kiev and other territories under the Kiev supervision. So it's very easy to say, look, it's our history, it's our history, it's our history. No, it's not. And they have nothing to do with us, except that they were attacking us from generation to generation and still haven't learned anything. They will never succeed.
Marina, and the last question, which I ask all my guests. What do you love about Ukraine?
What I love about Ukraine? The most of it. I do not like the situation that Russians and pro-Russian politicians created. because they are attacking the system of the courts. They are attacking the system, the role of international experts. This is unacceptable for me, and I'm writing everywhere that Ukrainians have to protect the system of the courts, independent courts in Ukraine. They have to fight for it because it's the basement, it's the ground for a democratic country, and it's a guarantee, one of the guarantees for the country's survival and existence. It's very important. What I love about Ukraine is the rest of it. And it's a lot, because when I come back to Ukraine, I feel that I'm breathing with my heart. And it's true, because when I'm abroad, I'm really, really worried. But when I visit Ukraine, even now during the war times, I'm breathing out. I feel that I'm home. Everything is correct. I feel that I just want to go around and hug all the people, but I'm not allowed to do that. I love Ukrainians. I'm very grateful for their fight, for their inspiration, for their humor, for their strength. They have enormous resources in their psychology, and they are fighting until their last breath. And then they unite, they support each other, they clean up all the mess that Russia creates. They cry, but not a long time, because they postpone their sorrow. They think there will be time to sit and cry because of all the losses. But it's very important to take short breaks and analyze all this and cry when you want to cry, because it's a normal reaction. That's the thing that make you normal, empathetic, and human. And it's normal to cry, it's normal to be angry, it's normal not to be able to sleep at night. It's normal not to be able to work as effectively as you probably could work in other circumstances. But we are living in an extreme world where nothing is the way we were expecting it to be. So accept yourselves, admire yourselves, believe in yourselves, and become the best friend of yourself, because you need one. We have so many enemies, but we have to respect ourselves, accept ourselves as we are, keep developing, keep educating ourselves, and support each other. It's very, very important, and we have to support our army every single day in any way we can, because it's the guarantee of the country existence, and it's the guarantee for stability in Europe and the rest of the world. It's very, very important. And I'm really grateful to every person that fights for Ukraine, that gives me and my team a possibility to conduct research and breathe properly.
Oh, Marina, thank you so much. I'm so honored, and I'm so it's beyond words to explain how much I'm grateful that you. I hope it's only the first appearance on the podcast and many more to come. The Swedish archives needs to be heard. You're absolutely right. We have to fight and support any way we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава! That was Marina Trattner, and she's the independent researcher of the Swedish archives. I'll leave all the links in the description under this video. So, Swedish archives, had your say? What do you think? Share your thoughts. Let's discuss it in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. If you enjoyed the conversation, this video, please like and share. Let's spread this for many more people. And I would like to thank you to spend this time with me and to watch this. Just remind you, I'm Jenny Klochko, and have a great day.